Autumn light filtered through golden aspen leaves, casting dancing shadows across the wooden porch of the Brooks Ranch. The year was 1923, and the mountains of Colorado wore their finest colors. A gentle wind carried the scent of pine and dried grass, the kind of afternoon that made a man reflect on all the years behind him. Nathaniel Brooks sat in his handmade oak rocking chair, the same chair he had built 30 years prior, when his hands were steadier and his back didn't protest every morning. At 74, he remained an imposing figure. His shoulders, though softened by age, still held the breadth of a man who had spent decades working the land. Silver hair, thick and neatly combed, caught the afternoon sun. His face bore the deep lines of a life lived outdoors, each crease a story, each scar a memory. The longest scar, running from temple to jaw, had faded to a pale line against weathered skin, but it remained visible, a permanent reminder of choices made 4 decades ago. He wore a brown wool vest over a white cotton shirt, a simple cravat at his throat. His hands, gnarled by arthritis but still capable, rested on his knees. Those hands had built this house, had tilled this soil, had fired weapons in defense of the defenseless, had taken lives when no other choice remained. 20 feet away, sitting on the porch steps with a leather notebook balanced on his knee, Thomas Brooks watched his grandfather with the intense curiosity of youth meeting the wisdom of age. 27 years old, having recently completed advanced studies at the Colorado School of Mines, Thomas represented everything new in America. The son of Nathaniel's late cousin, who had died in a mining accident when Thomas was young, the boy had been raised by Nathaniel and Grace as their own grandson. Tall and lean like his grandfather, he had the same striking blue eyes, though his held the eager brightness of someone who believed the world could be understood through education and reason. Thomas wore khaki trousers and a pressed shirt, the uniform of the educated class. A fountain pen rested in his fingers, poised above blank pages. He had come to the ranch with a specific purpose: to record the family history before it vanished with the old man's passing. What he did not expect was the story he was about to hear. The silence between them stretched comfortable and long, the way silence does between men who know each other well enough not to fill every moment with words. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp in the clear mountain air. The ranch spread before them, 200 acres of carefully tended land, testament to decades of honest work. Thomas broke the silence first. "Grandfather, my father told me you once killed a man. Is that true?" Nathaniel's rocking chair stopped mid-motion. His eyes, which had been watching the distant mountains, shifted to his grandson. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades, each word measured and deliberate. "A man has 3 kinds of strength, Thomas. The strength to strike, the strength to endure, and the strength to know when to use either one. I learned this in 1883 in the Wyoming Territory, when a woman knocked on my cabin door in the middle of a blizzard and told me she was willing to trade her body for a roof over her head." Thomas's pen froze above the page. This was not the story he had expected. Nathaniel continued, his voice taking on a different quality now, as if the years were falling away with each word. "This story is not about me saving a woman. It is about a woman who taught me the meaning of honor when I had forgotten it." He closed his eyes. The afternoon sounds faded, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, younger, harder, filled with the tension of a man living on the edge of civilization. "It was December of 1883. I was 34 years old, and I was trying to forget who I was. The cabin sat alone on the Wyoming plains like a defiant fist raised against an empty sky. 20 feet by 20 feet of hand-hewn logs, each one cut and notched by Nathaniel Brooks himself. No neighbors within 40 miles. No friends. No visitors. That was how he wanted it. That was how it had to be. 4 years he had lived this way. 4 years of solitude broken only by the wind and the occasional deer that wandered too close to his hunting grounds. 4 years of trying to outrun a past that refused to stay buried. Inside the cabin, sparse efficiency ruled every inch of space. A cast-iron stove in the northeast corner, its pipe extending through the roof smoke curling into the December sky. A narrow bed along the back wall, wool blankets folded with military precision. A wooden table he had built from pine, 2 chairs both sturdy. Pegs on the walls held saddles, tack-spare clothing. A small bookshelf, perhaps the only luxury he allowed himself, held worn volumes. Shakespeare, Twain, a leather-bound Bible his mother had given him. Legal texts from his previous life. On the mantel above the stove, 2 weapons. A Winchester Model 1873, the rifle that had become as familiar to him as his own hands. Beside it, a Colt Peacemaker, .45 caliber, 6 rounds of finality. Both cleaned and oiled weekly, both ready. Always ready. The old man's voice, speaking from 40 years in the future, narrated what the young man had been. In 1878, I worked as a Pinkerton detective in Denver. $80 a month, good money for those days. I investigated fraud, theft, sometimes murder. I was good at it. Too good, perhaps. I could track a man across 3 states. Could spot a lie the way a hawk spots a rabbit. Could use violence when violence was required. Then a man named Clayton Graves hired the Pinkerton agency. He was wealthy, owned 3 gambling halls, 2 saloons, 1 hotel in Silver Creek. He claimed someone had stolen from him. He wanted to know who. He wanted that person dealt with. He used the word dealt the way other men might say eliminated or disappeared. I understood what he meant. We all did. I investigated, and what I found was not simple theft. In the cabin that December evening in 1883, Nathaniel sat at his table, a book open before him. Hamlet. Act 3, Scene 1. To be or not to be? The question seemed particularly relevant to his own life. To exist as a man of principle, or to survive by any means necessary. To face the past, or to hide from it forever. The stew bubbling on the stove filled the cabin with the scent of beef potatoes, carrots, onions. Simple food, but honest. Everything about his life now was simple and honest, a stark contrast to what he had left behind. The old man's voice continued patient and relentless. March of 1879. I discovered Clayton Graves was running more than gambling halls. Prostitution, illegal opium, extortion. He kept 2 sets of books, one for the law, one for himself. A woman named Anna Morrison worked as his bookkeeper. She saw both sets. She understood what they meant. She wanted to leave. Clayton told her she owed him $500. She would work until the debt was paid. She knew what that meant. The debt would never be paid. I reported my findings to my supervisor. He told me Clayton was an important client. He told me not to look for problems. I realized then the agency had been bought. Justice, I learned, was less important than money. It always had been. In June of 1879, Clayton Graves invited me to a private meeting. He offered me $1,000 in cash. He showed me the money stacked neatly on his desk. He said Anna Morrison was about to testify against him in court. He needed her to disappear. Permanently. I refused. I told him I was not a killer. He smiled. He said everyone has a price. If not $1,000, perhaps something else. Perhaps my sister. Nathaniel's hands tightened on the book. Even now, 40 years later, sitting on a porch in Colorado, the memory burned. Thomas saw his grandfather's jaw clench, saw the muscles working beneath aged skin. What did he mean? Thomas asked quietly. The old man opened his eyes. He showed me a photograph. My sister Emily, 16 years old, attending the Denver Ladies' Academy. He said it would be a shame if something unfortunate happened to such a pretty girl. Thomas's pen had stopped moving entirely. What did you do? I had 3 choices: kill Anna Morrison and take the money and live with the guilt, refuse and let my sister die, or find a third way. I chose the third, but every choice has a price. In July of 1879, Nathaniel Brooks ceased to be a Pinkerton detective. He found Anna Morrison and explained the situation. Together they staged an accident at the South Platte River, a drowning. He obtained a body from the city morgue, a woman who had died of natural causes, no family, no one to claim her. He arranged the scene carefully. Clothing from Anna, her distinctive locket, a witness who saw a woman matching her description fall from the riverbank. Clayton Graves believed Anna was dead. Nathaniel put Anna on a train to San Francisco with a new name, Margaret Dawson, a schoolteacher, a fresh start. Then he took his sister to California to their Aunt Sarah in Sacramento. Emily was safe. Anna was safe. But Nathaniel Brooks could no longer exist in Denver. Clayton would eventually learn the truth, and when he did, vengeance would follow. So Nathaniel changed his appearance, let his beard grow, bought different clothes, moved to the Wyoming territory where land was cheap and questions were scarce. He built his cabin with his own hands, learned to live alone, tried to convince himself he had done the right thing. 4 years passed. 1879 became 1880. 1880 became 1883. Seasons turned. Snow fell and melted. Grass grew and died. And Nathaniel Brooks remained alone, haunted by a single question. Was I a coward for running, or was running the bravest thing I could have done? Every night he poured himself one small glass of whiskey, sat by the fire, read his books, and wondered if Emily was still safe in California, wondered if Anna was teaching children in San Francisco, wondered if Clayton had forgotten or if the man was still searching. He never wrote letters. Letters could be traced. He never visited. Visits left witnesses. He protected them by staying away. He told himself this was noble, but late at night, staring into the fire, he suspected it was simply loneliness wearing the mask of sacrifice. Outside the cabin window, the December storm built in the north. Dark clouds heavy with snow rolled across the plains like an invading army. The temperature dropped steadily. By evening it would be 15 degrees below zero. By midnight, lower still. The kind of cold that killed anything caught outside without shelter. Nathaniel checked his wood supply. Enough for 3 days. He checked his food. Beef, flour, beans, coffee. Enough for a week if he rationed carefully. He checked his weapons. Both loaded, both ready. He had no idea that before the night ended, all 3 would be needed. 8 o'clock. Full dark. The storm had arrived with the fury of nature unleashed. Wind screamed across the plains at 40 miles per hour, driving snow horizontal. Visibility dropped to nothing. The temperature continued its brutal descent. This was not weather for travel. This was weather that killed. Inside the cabin, Nathaniel sat reading by lamplight, the Winchester leaning against the wall within easy reach. The stove radiated heat, fighting against the cold pressing in from all sides. He had learned to read the weather, to sense when a storm would pass quickly or settle in for days. This one would last 3 days minimum. Anyone caught outside would be dead by morning. The knock on his door, when it came, was so faint he almost missed it. Not a strong knock, not demanding, almost apologetic, as if the person outside understood they were imposing but had no other choice. Nathaniel set down his book. No one traveled in this weather. No one except someone running from something worse than the cold. He stood moving with the careful silence of a hunter. The Winchester came to his hand automatically. He checked the chamber with his thumb. Loaded. 15 rounds. He moved to the side of the door, not standing directly in front. Old habits from his Pinkerton days. Never put yourself where an expected bullet would travel. Who is there? No answer. Only wind. He waited. Counted to 10. Asked again. Who is there? Still nothing. Perhaps he had imagined it. Perhaps the wind had thrown a branch against the door. Perhaps. He opened the door, 6 inches, rifle ready. A woman collapsed across his threshold. She fell forward, her momentum carrying her past the partially open door, and she hit the cabin floor hard. Snow covered her from head to foot. Her lips were blue. Her skin held the waxy pallor of severe hypothermia. Her hands, visible as her coat sleeves rode up, showed raw flesh where the skin had frozen and cracked. Nathaniel's eyes scanned beyond her, searching the darkness for others, for men with guns, for an ambush using a woman as bait. He saw nothing but the storm. The plains stretched empty in all directions, visibility perhaps 20 feet at most. He made his decision in seconds. She was alone. She was dying, and whatever her story, she needed help. Inside. Now. He did not help her stand. If she could stand on her own, she was not yet in the final stages of hypothermia. If she could not, he would need to treat her immediately. Grace Hartley, though he did not yet know her name, pushed herself to her hands and knees, rose unsteadily, staggered 2 steps into the cabin. Nathaniel closed the door behind her, threw the bolt, and set the rifle aside, but kept it close. 26 years old, though she looked older. Life had not been kind. Brown hair hung in frozen tangles. Her dress, once brown wool, was torn and filthy. Her boots had given up any pretense of functionality. The leather cracked, the soles nearly separated from the uppers. She wore no coat adequate for this weather, only a thin shawl that provided almost no protection. In her arms she clutched a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Nathaniel assessed her condition with the clinical eye of someone trained in emergency medicine. Pinkerton detectives learned field medicine. They had to. Help was rarely close. Pupils dilated but reactive. Good. No brain damage yet. Breathing fast and shallow. Expected. Her body was trying to generate heat. Shivering violently. Actually good. Shivering meant her core temperature had not dropped below the critical threshold. When shivering stopped, death followed quickly. Fingers red and swollen. Frostbite, but not severe. She would keep her fingers if treated properly. He pointed to the chair nearest the stove. Sit. Not too close to the fire. Your body needs to warm slowly. His voice was not unkind, but it carried the tone of a man giving orders, not making suggestions. She obeyed without question, sinking into the chair with a small sound that might have been relief or might have been pain. Nathaniel moved efficiently. He took a wool blanket from the bed, not cotton, because cotton held moisture, and draped it around her shoulders. Not tight. Blood needed to circulate. He went to the stove where water was already heating and poured it into a tin cup. He tested the temperature with his finger. Warm, not hot. Hot liquid would shock her system. Drink. Small sips. She took the cup with shaking hands and immediately gulped half of it. Water spilled down her chin. She choked, coughed, doubled over. I said small sips. Drink too fast and you will vomit. Vomiting in your condition could kill you. She nodded, controlled herself, sipped more carefully. Color began to return to her lips, though her hands continued to shake. Nathaniel ladled beef stew into a bowl and placed it on the table. Eat, slowly. Your stomach is in shock. Grace Hartley ate like someone who had not seen food in days. She maintained better control than with the water, but after 5 minutes she suddenly stood, rushed to the door, and vomited outside in the snow. Nathaniel watched from the doorway but did not help. She needed to empty her stomach. It was part of the process. When she finished and turned back, he was waiting. How long since you ate? 3 days. She managed her voice raw. How long have you been walking? 4 days. From where? She hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. She was running, she was scared, and she was about to lie to him. Where from? He repeated, his voice harder now. Silver Creek. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck went rigid. His hand unconsciously moved toward the rifle. Silver Creek. Of all the towns in Wyoming Territory, of all the places she could have run from. Silver Creek is 3 days' walk in good weather. 4 in this, he said carefully. I got lost. The snow started on the 2nd day. He studied her face. She was not lying now. He had spent years learning to read people, and this woman was telling the truth. She had walked 4 days through increasingly brutal weather. She should be dead. That she was alive at all spoke to either remarkable luck or stubborn will, probably both. Who is looking for you? She did not answer. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I asked you a question. I need an answer. Clayton Graves, she whispered. The name hung in the air between them like poison gas. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. His breathing slowed. The room, warm moments before, suddenly felt cold. Clayton Graves. The man he had been running from for 4 years. The man who had forced him into exile. The man who threatened his sister. He set down the bowl he had been holding, slowly, deliberately, each movement controlled. He walked to the window and looked out at the storm, though he saw nothing but his own reflection in the dark glass. "Clayton Graves," he repeated. "Who runs the Silver Creek Gaming Hall?" "Yes." "You worked for him." It was not a question. He knew. "Yes." "Upstairs." Grace's face flushed with shame. She nodded, unable to speak. Nathaniel turned back to face her. His voice, when it came, was flat and cold. "You ran. He is chasing you, and now you have brought him to my door." "I am sorry. I did not mean to." "Do not apologize. Just tell me the truth. Does he know you came here?" "No. I told no one." "Did anyone see you leave Silver Creek?" I do not know. I left at 2 in the morning." Nathaniel's mind worked through the probabilities. Clayton was not stupid. He would ask questions in town. Someone would have seen her. They would tell him she walked east. There were 3 roads east: the main road to Casper, the secondary road to Riverton, and the trail across the open plains, the trail that passed near his cabin. In 2 or 3 days, Clayton's men would come. They would search every structure, every cave, every place a person might hide. They would find her, and they would find him. And when Clayton Graves discovered that the woman he was hunting had found shelter with Nathaniel Brooks, the man who had cost him money and embarrassment 4 years ago, there would be blood. The old man's voice, speaking from the future, interjected with the weight of hindsight. I calculated the odds. They were not good. Clayton would send men, at least 3, probably more. They would be armed. They would be experienced. I had home advantage, but they had numbers. If I sent Grace back into the storm, she would die. If I kept her, we might both die. But there was a third option. We could prepare. We could make the cost of taking her so high that Clayton's men would think twice. Or we could run, take horses, ride through the storm, try to reach Riverton or Casper before Clayton's men arrived. But running meant leaving everything I had built. It meant starting over. Again. It meant spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Again. I was tired of running. Perhaps that was the real truth. After 4 years of hiding, 4 years of pretending to be someone I was not, I was simply tired. 10 o'clock. The storm continued its assault on the cabin walls. Inside, Grace had warmed sufficiently that her shivering had mostly stopped. She sat wrapped in the blanket, sipping water, while Nathaniel sat at the table cleaning his Winchester with a cloth and gun oil. The mechanical action soothed him. Disassemble. Clean each part. Oil lightly. Reassemble. Check the action. It was a ritual, something to do with his hands while his mind worked through problems. The rifle was a Model 1873, chambered in .44-40 caliber, 15-round capacity. Effective range approximately 200 yards in the hands of a skilled shooter. Nathaniel had made modifications over the years. He had filed the trigger mechanism to reduce pull weight, giving him a smoother, more predictable break. He had replaced the standard rear sight with a finer one taken from a target rifle, improving his accuracy. The weapon was not factory new, but it was his, and he knew its capabilities and limitations better than he knew his own. "Tell me," he said without looking up from his work. "From the beginning." Grace hesitated. Telling her story meant exposing her shame, but this man had saved her life. He deserved the truth. "My father was Thomas Hartley, a carpenter in Laramie. In 1875 he was working on a bridge over the North Platte River. There was an accident. A rope broke. He fell 60 feet onto rocks, died instantly. The company said it was his fault. They gave us nothing." Nathaniel's hands continued their work on the rifle, but he was listening. Every word. "My mother Elizabeth tried to support us. She did laundry for wealthy families. I worked at a general store. Together we made maybe $20 a month. Rent was $8. Food was $10. We were always behind, always in debt. In 1878 my mother got sick. Tuberculosis. The medicine cost $40 for 3 months. We did not have $40. We borrowed from the bank. She died anyway in February of 1879. The funeral cost another $30. Coffin, burial plot, pastor. Suddenly I owed $150. I was 22 years old. I had no family, no skills anyone would pay for. The bank threatened to have me arrested for debt. Nathaniel set down the rifle and looked at her directly. Go on. I heard there was work in Silver Creek. I went there in 1880. I met a woman named Sarah Winters. She ran a boarding house. She explained how it worked. The boarding house was legal. The work upstairs was not, but it paid. $5 per customer. I kept 2. Clayton Graves took 3. I paid $10 a month for my room and food. Clayton offered me a loan, $100, 10% interest per month. I could pay off my old debts and start fresh. I did not understand. I did not realize the interest was compounding. I did not know about the extra fees he would add. Room fee, food fee, management fee, security fee, laundry fee. By the time I paid all his fees, I had maybe $5 or $10 a month to pay toward the loan principal. I worked 3 years. I paid him $280, but he said I still owed $200 more. I checked his ledger. The numbers did not make sense. I asked Sarah. She told me everyone's ledger was like that. The debt never ended. We worked until we were too old or too sick, and then he threw us out. She stopped, her voice breaking. There was another girl, Lily May, 19 years old. She tried to run last month. They found her at the bottom of the stairs, broken neck. Clayton said it was an accident, but Sarah saw bruises on Lily's throat, fingerprints. Sarah came to me 3 days ago. She said I was next. She said Clayton had decided I was causing trouble by asking questions about the ledger. She said I should run that night. So I took $20 from money I had hidden. I took a letter my mother wrote me before she died, and I walked east. I thought maybe I could reach Cheyenne or Casper, somewhere big enough that Clayton would not find me. But the storm came. I got lost. I ran out of food. I thought I was going to die. Then I saw smoke from your chimney. Nathaniel sat back in his chair. The story was familiar. He had heard versions of it before. Women trapped by debt. Men like Clayton who used the law as a weapon. The system protected men with money and crushed anyone without power. It was not right, but it was the reality. You do not owe Clayton Graves $200, Nathaniel said. According to basic mathematics, you have paid more than the original loan, plus any reasonable interest. His ledger is fraudulent. I know, but his ledger is the only record that matters. He has lawyers. He has the sheriff. I have nothing. You have the truth. Grace laughed, and it was a bitter sound. The truth does not matter when no one will listen. They sat in silence. Outside the wind howled. Inside the fire crackled. 2 people strangers until an hour ago, connected by the simple fact that both were running from the same man. Finally Grace stood. Her legs were steady now. The warmth had returned to her body, though her feet were still tender from frostbite. She walked to where Nathaniel sat and stopped 3 feet away. Her hands twisted the edge of the blanket. "Mr. Brooks," she said softly. He looked up. "I do not have money. I do not have anything to pay you for this shelter. But I can. I can do whatever you want. Just let me stay until spring. Please." The words hung in the air. Outside, the storm seemed to pause, as if the entire world was waiting for his response. Nathaniel stood slowly. He was tall, 6 feet 2 inches, and he towered over her. But he did not move closer, did not reach for her, did not let his eyes travel over her body the way so many men had. "No," he said simply. "I will not tell anyone. I said no." Grace's face crumpled. She had offered the only thing she had left, and he had refused. She did not understand. Men always wanted this. It was the one transaction that always worked. Nathaniel saw her confusion and her pain. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than it had been all night. "Miss Hartley, listen carefully. Clayton Graves took your money. He took 3 years of your life. He took your dignity and your hope. But he only succeeds in taking these things if you give them to him, or to me, or to any man who would use your desperation against you." He paused, making sure she was listening. "A roof is a roof. A meal is a meal. These are things any human being should have, not because they trade something for it, but because it is basic humanity. My grandfather taught me this. He said a man is measured by how he treats people who can offer him nothing in return. You owe me nothing, and I will take nothing from you." Tears began to fall down Grace's cheeks. In 3 years at the boarding house and countless transactions with countless men, no one had ever spoken to her this way. No one had ever suggested she had value beyond her body. "Why?" she whispered. "You do not know me. You are a woman who walked 4 days through a blizzard because you wanted to live free. That is all I need to know." The old man's voice, speaking from 40 years later on the Colorado porch, added the context the young man had not shared. I did not tell her the real reason. I did not tell her that 4 years earlier I had failed to protect Anna Morrison. I had let Clayton terrorize her. I had let him force me into a corner. Yes, I had saved her eventually, but it had been desperate and messy and barely successful. Here was another woman, another victim of the same man, and this time I would not run. This time I would stand and fight, not because I was a hero, but because I was tired of being a coward. Grace wiped her eyes. "What happens now? Now you sleep in the bed, I sleep in the chair. Tomorrow we prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For Clayton's men. They are coming, probably within 2 days. When they arrive, we will be ready." Grace looked at this strange man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. This man who spoke of fighting Clayton Graves, something no one ever did. This man who treated her like a human being with value. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet. This is not over." She lay down on the bed, exhausted beyond measure, and sleep claimed her within minutes. Nathaniel sat in the chair by the door, the Winchester across his knees, and stared out the window at the storm. At 2 in the morning he heard them. Horses. 3 of them, moving slowly through the snow. They stopped 200 yards from the cabin, close enough to see the smoke from his chimney, close enough to confirm someone was inside, far enough to avoid being shot. Nathaniel did not move. He watched through the window as the 3 riders sat on their horses conferring. He could not hear their words, but he understood their purpose. They were reconnaissance, counting how many people were in the cabin, looking for weaknesses, planning their attack. After 10 minutes they rode away, but Nathaniel knew they would return, probably at dawn, probably with more men. He checked his ammunition. Winchester held 15 rounds. He had 50 spare rounds in a wooden box. The Colt Peacemaker held 6 rounds. He had 24 spare rounds for the pistol, 76 rounds total. Against how many men? 3 at minimum, possibly 6, possibly more. The odds were not good. But Nathaniel Brooks had learned something in his 4 years of isolation. Sometimes a man reaches a point where running is worse than fighting, where dying with honor is better than living with shame. He had run from Clayton Graves once. He would not run again. He looked at Grace sleeping on the bed, innocent in this moment, peaceful. She deserved better than what life had given her. They all did. All the women Clayton Graves had used and discarded. All the people the system had crushed. Maybe he could not fix the system. Maybe he could not change the world. But he could defend this cabin. He could protect this woman. And if Clayton wanted her back, he would have to go through Nathaniel Brooks to get her. The old man's voice concluded the first part of the story. Thomas, sitting on the porch in 1923, looked at his grandfather with new eyes. "What did you do?" the young man asked. Nathaniel Brooks, 74 years old, looked at his grandson with eyes that had seen too much death and yet refused to turn away from life. "I sat in that chair all night. I thought about Clayton, about Anna, about my sister Emily, about all the choices I had made, all the times I had run when I should have stood, all the times I had been silent when I should have spoken. And I asked myself one question." What question? Whether this time, just this once, I could do the right thing. The sun began to set over the Colorado mountains. Golden light faded to orange, then red, then purple. Soon it would be dark. But for now, in the space between day and night, an old man prepared to tell his grandson about the moment that defined his life. About the moment when running stopped and fighting began. About the moment when a woman's dignity became worth more than his own safety. About the 3 days in December of 1883 when honor and survival collided and only one could prevail. The storm broke just before dawn. The wind, which had screamed against the cabin walls all night, gradually subsided to a low moan, then silence. The kind of silence that only exists after a blizzard, when the world lies buried under fresh snow and every sound is muffled. Through the window the sky transitioned from black to deep blue to the pale gray of winter morning. Nathaniel had not slept. He remained in the chair by the door, Winchester across his lap, watching, listening, calculating. At 5 a.m, with the first hint of light touching the horizon, he stood and moved to wake Grace. "Up," he said quietly. "We do not have much time." Grace woke instantly, the sleep of someone accustomed to danger, someone whose survival depended on staying alert. She sat up disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was and why. "They came last night," Nathaniel said. "3 riders. They know you are here. They will attack when there is enough light to see. We have perhaps 2 hours to prepare." "What do we do?" "You learn to shoot. Now." He handed her the Colt Peacemaker. The weapon was heavy in her hands, heavier than she expected. Steel and wood and the weight of potential death. She held it awkwardly, finger on the trigger muzzle pointing vaguely in his direction. Nathaniel's hand shot out and pushed the barrel toward the floor. "Rule number 1. A gun is always loaded. Even when you know it is not you, treat it as if it is. Rule number 2. Never point a weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. Rule number 3. Keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire. Rule number 4. Know your target and what is behind it. Understand?" Grace nodded, chastened. "Say it back to me." She repeated the 4 rules, her voice gaining strength with each one. Nathaniel watched her carefully. She was scared, but she was listening. Fear could be useful if channeled properly. Fear kept you alert, kept you alive. The Colt Peacemaker is a single-action revolver, 45 caliber, 6 rounds. You must cock the hammer before each shot. Like this. He demonstrated his thumb, pulling the hammer back until it locked with a solid click. The sound echoed in the quiet cabin. To reload, you open the loading gate on the right side, rotate the cylinder, eject the spent casings, load new rounds, 6 in total. Never load only 5. That was common advice years ago, keeping the hammer on an empty chamber for safety. But if someone is shooting at you, you need every round. Grace absorbed the information. Her hands, which had been shaking when she first held the weapon, began to steady as familiarity replaced fear. "Now, grip. Both hands. Strong hand your right grips the handle firmly. Support hand your left wraps around your right. Not crushing. Firm. Like shaking hands with someone you respect." She adjusted her grip. "Better. Stance. Feet shoulder-width apart. Left foot slightly forward. Lean forward 5 degrees. Knees slightly bent. You want a stable platform. If you stand rigid, the recoil will knock you backward. If you lean too far forward, you lose balance. Find the middle." Grace positioned herself. Nathaniel circled her, making small adjustments. Pushed her right elbow down, lifted her chin slightly, shifted her left foot an inch forward. Aiming. 3 points in a line. Rear sight, front sight, target. Your eye focuses on the front sight. The target will be slightly blurry. That is correct. Now, breathing. Inhale. Exhale halfway. Hold. Squeeze the trigger. Do not pull. Do not jerk. Squeeze. He set a tin can on the table 15 feet away. Opened the door to allow Grace to fire outside without deafening them both in the enclosed space. The cold air rushed in, but neither of them noticed. "Fire when ready." Grace aimed. Her hands shook. She squeezed the trigger. The Colt roared. The recoil snapped her arms up. The gun nearly flew from her hands. She stumbled backward, catching herself on the doorframe. The tin can sat undisturbed on the table. Again. She reset her stance. Aimed. Fired. Miss. Again. 3rd shot. Miss. "I cannot do this," she said, frustration and despair mixing in her voice. "You can. And you will, because your life depends on it." Again. 4th shot. The bullet grazed the table edge, splinters flying. Close. 5th shot. Hit. The can jumped and clattered to the floor. Grace allowed herself a small smile. Nathaniel did not. You fired 5 times to hit one stationary target at 15 feet. In a real fight, your target will be moving, shooting back, and you will be terrified. But at least now you know the weapon will fire. Now you know what recoil feels like. That is the point. Not accuracy, familiarity, understanding that you can pull the trigger without freezing. He showed her how to reload. Opening the loading gate took strength. Her cold fingers fumbled with the mechanism, the spent brass casing stuck in the cylinder requiring her to push the ejector rod multiple times. Loading fresh rounds was slow, clumsy work. "How long did that take you?" Nathaniel asked. "I do not know. 30 seconds. 28. In combat, if you take more than 10 seconds to reload, you are dead. Try again." She practiced. 20 seconds. 15. 12. 8. Her fingers learned the movements. Muscle memory began to form. By the 10th repetition, she could reload in 7 seconds. Not fast, but adequate. "If you have to shoot someone," Nathaniel said, his voice flat and clinical, "aim for the chest. Center mass. It is the largest target. Do not try for the head. Do not try for the arms or legs. Under stress you will miss. Aim for the torso. Fire twice. 2 rounds, then reassess. Understand? If I kill someone, will I be arrested? Only if you survive to be arrested. Right now, that is not our primary concern." The lesson continued until the sun cleared the horizon. Grace's hands were sore from gripping the Colt. Her ears rang from the gunfire. But she could load, aim, and fire. It was not proficiency, but it was capability. And capability might be enough. While Grace practiced, Nathaniel fortified the cabin. This was the practical work he had learned building the structure, understanding weight distribution and structural integrity. He moved the heavy wooden table to the south-facing window, the direction from which attack would most likely come. The table was solid pine 2 inches thick, capable of stopping most pistol rounds and slowing rifle bullets. He positioned it at an angle, creating a narrow gap through which he could fire while remaining mostly protected. He stacked saddles on the windowsill. Leather and wood, not perfect cover, but better than nothing. He placed his ammunition boxes strategically, one near the south window, one near the stove where Grace would take position, one near the back wall as reserve. He filled 2 buckets with snow and placed them near the door. If the cabin caught fire, he would need water immediately. He weakened several boards on the north wall, the back of the cabin, creating an emergency escape route. If they were overrun, if retreat became necessary, they could kick through the weakened boards and run. He explained his tactical assessment to Grace, speaking in the measured tones of a military instructor. "They will approach from the south. The sun will be behind them in our eyes. That gives them advantage. But we have elevation. The cabin sits on a small rise, perhaps 10 feet higher than the surrounding ground. That gives us advantage. We have cover. They have none. We can see them coming from 200 yards. They cannot see into the cabin until they are close. They have numbers. We have preparation. They have mobility. We have defense. The question becomes, can we make the cost of taking you high enough that they decide it is not worth the price?" Grace listened, absorbing the cold logic of violence. This was not the romanticized combat of dime novels. This was mathematics, angles, probabilities, the calculus of survival. "What if they just wait?" she asked. "What if they surround the cabin and starve us out? Then we have 3 days of food and water. After that we run or we surrender. But I do not think they will wait. Clayton wants this resolved quickly. The longer it takes, the more likely word spreads, the more likely someone asks questions. No, they will attack today. Probably within the next few hours." Nathaniel was proven correct at 8 o'clock in the morning. 3 riders appeared on the southern horizon, black shapes against white snow. They rode slowly, deliberately stopping at approximately 150 yards from the cabin, far enough to avoid accurate rifle fire, close enough to make their presence known. Nathaniel retrieved his telescope from a wooden box under the bed. It was a brass instrument military issue, something he had kept from his Pinkerton days. He extended it, braced it against the window frame, and studied the riders. The leader sat center, and Nathaniel recognized the type immediately. Military bearing, confident posture. A man accustomed to command and violence. He wore an army surplus coat, a cavalry hat pulled low. A rifle rested across his saddle, held casually in one hand. His face bore a long scar running from left ear across his cheek to his jaw. The mark of a knife fight survived. "Marcus Webb," Nathaniel said quietly. "I know him by reputation. Former Army scout. Discharged dishonorably after some incident at a cavalry post. Now he works for men like Clayton. Tracking, enforcement. He is very good at finding people who do not want to be found." The second rider was younger, perhaps 20 years old. He sat his horse awkwardly, like someone more accustomed to farming than riding. His rifle looked new, probably purchased specifically for this job. His face, visible even at this distance through the telescope, showed nervousness. He kept glancing at Marcus, looking for guidance. "That one is not a professional," Nathaniel observed. "Probably local, probably desperate for money. Clayton likely offered him $50. To a farmer's son, that is 6 months' wages, enough to ignore conscience." The third rider was a physical presence, even at 150 yards. Massive shoulders, a thick neck. He carried a shotgun visible by its distinctive shortened barrel. Shotguns were devastating at close range, but useless beyond 50 feet. His presence indicated Marcus planned to get close. "The big one is the problem," Nathaniel said. "Shotguns do not require accuracy. Point and fire. At close range, even a poor shot can kill. If he reaches the cabin, he is extremely dangerous." The three riders did not advance. They simply sat on their horses watching. The message was clear. "We know you are in there. We know you cannot leave. We will wait for the moment of our choosing." Nathaniel did not respond, did not show himself at the window, did not give them any information about how many people were inside or how well armed they might be. Silence was a weapon. Let them wonder. Let them worry. At 9 o'clock, Marcus Webb raised one hand and shouted, his voice carrying clearly across the snow-covered ground. "Whoever is in there, we are looking for a woman. Brunette, mid-20s. Grace Hartley. She is property of Mr. Clayton Graves. Send her out. No trouble." Nathaniel remained silent. Marcus waited 30 seconds. Tried again. "I know you can hear me. We are not leaving without her. We can do this easy or hard. Your choice." Still no response. "All right. Let us talk business. Mr. Graves is a reasonable man. He is willing to pay $200 for Grace's return. Unharmed. That is good money. Just open the door." Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "She is not here." Marcus laughed, a sound without humor. "Bullshit. We tracked her here. 4 days of footprints in the snow. She is in there." "Even if she was, I would not hand her over to Clayton Graves." There was a pause. Marcus's head tilted slightly as if trying to place the voice. "Do I know you?" "No." "You sound familiar. You have a name." "None of your business." "Fair enough. But let me make something clear. We have 3 guns out here. You have maybe 1 or 2 in there. We have time. We have supplies. You have what? A few days of food. A week at most. Winter just started. You going to starve?" Nathaniel's response was not words, but action. He aimed the Winchester at a rock approximately 6 inches from Marcus Webb's horse. Fired once. The bullet struck exactly where he aimed. The horse reared, nearly throwing Marcus from the saddle. The other 2 riders scattered, seeking cover that did not exist. When they regained control, Marcus was furious. "You son of a—" "I have a Winchester with 15 rounds, Nathaniel called out. "At this range I can put a bullet through your eye before you finish that sentence. I am a very good shot. Do you want to test how good?" The riders retreated to 200 yards, a safer distance. They dismounted, using their horses as cover, and appeared to be arguing among themselves. 30 minutes later, the young rider approached alone, holding a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. A parley flag. He stopped at 50 yards, clearly terrified. "Mr. Webb says we can negotiate." Nathaniel stepped outside, Winchester ready. Grace remained inside, Colt in hand, watching through the window. Up close, the young man looked even younger, 19 at most. Thin face, scared eyes. This was someone's son, someone who should be home helping with farm work, not involved in whatever this was. "State your business." "Miss Hartley, Mr. Graves says if she comes back willing he will forgive the debt. Clean slate. She can walk away free after." "And you believe that?" The young man's face showed his doubt. "Well, Mr. Graves gave his word." "His word means nothing. You know it, I know it, she knows it. Now ride back and tell Marcus Webb to leave. Now, or I start killing." "But Mr. Graves—" Nathaniel stepped closer. His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "Son, listen carefully. I have killed men before. Good men, bad men, made no difference to me. You look like a good kid. Do not die for Clayton's money. It is not worth it." The young man, whose name was Billy according to his nervous introduction, swallowed hard. "I will tell Mr. Webb." He rode back. Nathaniel watched him go, then returned to the cabin. Grace met him at the door. "Will they leave?" "No, they will attack. Tonight or tomorrow. Marcus is not the type to quit." They ate a cold meal, dried beef, hardtack, water. No fire in the stove now. Smoke would give away their exact position. They needed every advantage. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a fourth rider appeared. This one was different. He wore a badge that caught the sunlight. He rode alone, hands visible, making no threatening moves. Deputy Marshal Thomas Hackett was 52 years old, gray mustache, tired eyes. He had the look of a man who had seen too much corruption and not enough justice, but who still wore his badge because someone had to. He stopped 30 yards from the cabin and called out, "I am Deputy Marshal Hackett, United States Marshal Service. I am looking for Nathaniel Brooks and Grace Hartley." Nathaniel stepped outside again this time, leaving the rifle inside but keeping his hand near the Colt on his hip. "I am Brooks." "And Miss Hartley." Grace appeared in the doorway. "I am here." The deputy dismounted, approached slowly. His movements were deliberate, non-threatening. This was a man who understood that sudden moves got people killed. "Miss Hartley, there is a warrant for your arrest. Theft. $300 from Clayton Graves Gaming Hall, Silver Creek." "That is a lie. I worked 3 years. According to legal documents filed with the Silver Creek County Clerk, you owe Mr. Graves $500 in outstanding debts and interest." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Those documents are fraudulent. Can you prove it? Can he prove they are legitimate?" "Burden of proof is on the accused, not the accuser. That is how the law works." The deputy explained the legal situation with the weary patience of someone who had delivered bad news many times before. Clayton had filed paperwork 6 months prior. There were time stamps, notary signatures, a ledger showing Grace's debts and payments. In the eyes of the law, the documentation appeared legitimate. Grace had the right to a trial, but she would have to return to Silver Creek to await that trial. The trial could take 3 to 6 months. During that time, she would be in Clayton's custody. Nathaniel understood the trap immediately. Grace would never survive 6 months in Clayton's custody. She would die of an accident, or illness, or simply disappear one night. The trial would never happen. "Deputy, you know this is a trap." Marshal Hackett sighed, and in that sigh was the frustration of every honest lawman working in a corrupt system. "Maybe, probably. But I am law enforcement. I follow the law. Even when the law is being used as a weapon, that is my job." "If I go back, I will die," Grace said quietly. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "Another girl died last month, Lily May. They said it was an accident, but there were bruises on her throat." "Hearsay. No body to examine. No official witness. I am sorry, but that is not evidence I can use." The deputy looked at Grace for a long moment, looked at Nathaniel, looked at Marcus Webb and his men watching from the distance. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, each word chosen precisely. "Mr. Brooks, I have to report that I found Miss Hartley here. I have to ride back to Silver Creek, file paperwork, and return with proper custody orders. That is procedure." "How long?" Nathaniel asked, understanding dawning. Official procedure requires at least 48 hours, maybe 72 if the weather is bad, and the weather looks like it might get bad again. Their eyes met. An understanding passed between them. Of course, if Miss Hartley is not here when I return, I can only arrest who I can find. I cannot arrest someone I cannot locate. He mounted his horse, prepared to leave. Then he paused as if remembering something. Wyoming territory is very large, Mr. Brooks. Many places to disappear. Riverton, Casper, Montana, Canada. A smart person would not be here when I return. He tipped his hat and rode away. After he left, Grace turned to Nathaniel. He is helping us. He is giving us a choice. We have 48 hours, run or fight. If we run, Clayton will always hunt me. If we fight and kill his men, we will be wanted for murder. Yes. They stood in silence, watching the deputy ride away. Marcus Webb and his men remained on the horizon, patient vultures waiting for weakness. Grace spoke first. There is a third option. What? We do not kill his men. We kill Clayton, the source of the problem. Nathaniel turned to look at her. There was something different in her eyes now. Not the desperate fear of the woman who had collapsed at his door. Something harder, more resolved. Clayton will not come here alone, he said. Then we make him think he has to. We tell him we have something he needs, something he cannot afford to lose. What could we possibly have that Clayton needs? His ledger, the real one, the one that shows all his crimes, all his fraud. I will say Sarah stole it and gave it to me. Clayton will want it back badly enough to risk coming himself. Nathaniel studied her face. This was not the plan of a victim. This was tactics, strategy. She was thinking like a soldier. Do you actually have his ledger? No, but he does not know that. A slow smile crossed Nathaniel's face. The first smile in 4 years. Miss Hartley, you might just survive this after all. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Nathaniel wrote a note carefully worded to sound believable. Grace has the real ledger. Sarah Winters gave it to her. If Grace dies, the ledger goes to the U.S. Marshal and the newspapers. Come alone at noon tomorrow if you want it back. Bring men, and she burns it. Young Billy, acting as messenger, delivered the note to Marcus. Marcus would send it to Clayton by the fastest rider. Clayton would receive it tonight, would spend the night deciding, would arrive tomorrow, probably, or he would send 20 men and burn the cabin to the ground. It was a gamble, but gambling was better than waiting to die. As darkness fell, Nathaniel and Grace finalized their positions. She would stay in the cabin with the Colt. He would hide in the barn 50 yards away with the Winchester. When Clayton arrived, Grace would step out claiming the ledger was inside. If Clayton entered the cabin, she would lock him in from the outside using a heavy bar Nathaniel installed. With Clayton trapped, Nathaniel would attack Marcus and the others from surprise. It was not a perfect plan. It relied on Clayton being stupid enough to enter the cabin alone. It relied on perfect timing. It relied on luck. But it was all they had. "Are you scared?" Grace asked as they waited for morning. "Yes. Me too." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you alive. It is confidence that gets you killed." They did not sleep. They sat in darkness, weapons ready, listening to the wind and wondering if tomorrow would bring freedom or death. Outside, Marcus Webb and his men also waited, and somewhere in Silver Creek, Clayton Graves received a message that would force him to make a choice. Come alone and risk ambush, or send an army and risk his secrets being exposed. By morning, everyone would have their answer. Dawn came with deceptive peace, clear sky, still air, the kind of morning that made the previous day's storm seem like a distant memory. The temperature had risen slightly, hovering just below freezing. Perfect conditions for what was coming. At 10 o'clock, dust appeared on the southern horizon. Not 3 riders this time. 6. Nathaniel, hidden in the barn behind stacked hay bales, watched through a gap in the wall. He had positioned himself carefully, creating a sniper's nest with clear sight lines to the cabin and the approach. The Winchester rested on a hay bale, steady and ready. 50 rounds of spare ammunition lay within easy reach. The riders approached slowly, confidently. They were not worried about ambush. They had numbers. They had Clayton Graves. The man himself rode center on a magnificent black horse that probably cost more than most men earned in a year. Even from a distance, Clayton's wealth was obvious. Black suit, gold watch chain glinting in the sunlight. He sat tall in the saddle, a man who owned everything he surveyed. Behind him, Marcus Webb and the two others from yesterday, plus 3 new men, all hard-looking individuals with the eyes of professional killers. This was not a negotiation party. This was an execution squad. Clayton stopped 100 yards out, dismounted with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being in control. He walked forward alone, slowly, hands visible and empty. "Mr. Brooks," he called out, "I believe we have business." Nathaniel remained hidden, silent. Let Clayton wonder where he was. Let uncertainty work on him. "Did you really think I would fall for such an amateur bluff? I have been playing games since before you were born, Mr. Brooks. Grace does not have my ledger. Sarah Winters would not dare steal from me. I own her. This whole setup is a desperate attempt, but I admire the creativity." He stopped 50 yards from the cabin. "So here is my counteroffer. Grace comes out, returns with me. I promise not to harm her, just back to work. You, Mr. Brooks, right away. Forget about her. Forget about Silver Creek. Keep your life. Everyone wins." Nathaniel spoke from the barn, his voice carrying clearly. "And if I refuse, then my men burn the cabin. Grace dies. You die. And I ride home for dinner. Either way, I win. So why not choose the option where you live?" Grace appeared in the cabin doorway. The movement surprised everyone. She had decided on her own to accelerate the plan. "Mr. Graves?" Clayton turned genuine surprise on his face. "Miss Hartley, how nice to see you. I will come back with you." Nathaniel, hidden in the barn, tensed. This was not the plan. What was she doing? "But I have one condition," Grace continued. "You let Mr. Brooks leave. You do not hunt him. No revenge." "And why would I agree to that?" "Because if you do not, I will tell everyone about Anna Morrison." The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Clayton's composed expression cracked, just for a second, just enough to show that Grace had struck a nerve. "Who?" he asked, but his voice had lost its confident tone. "Anna Morrison, the woman you hired Pinkertons to kill, the woman who Sarah told me about, the woman currently living in San Francisco under the name Margaret Dawson, working as a schoolteacher, the woman willing to testify about you if I ask her to." Nathaniel, listening from the barn, felt a surge of admiration. Grace had taken the fragments of story he had told her and weaponized them. She was bluffing, but it was a magnificent bluff, and Clayton for the first time looked uncertain. "You are lying." "Maybe. But are you willing to risk it? If Anna testifies, how much will it cost you?" "How many years in prison?" Clayton calculated. His mind worked through probabilities. If Anna was alive, if she testified, if a jury believed her over him, he could lose everything. But this woman, this girl who used to work in his establishment, how could she possibly know about Anna? Unless Sarah had talked. Unless the Pinkerton detective who had helped Anna 4 years ago was now helping Grace. Clayton looked around at the empty plains, at the cabin, at the barn. "Mr. Brooks," he called out, "show yourself." Nathaniel emerged from the barn, Winchester raised and aimed directly at Clayton's chest. The range was 40 yards, an easy shot. The 6 men with Clayton immediately drew weapons. Suddenly everyone was aiming at everyone else. A classic Mexican standoff. One trigger pull, and everyone dies. "Nathaniel Brooks," Clayton said, recognition dawning. "The Pinkerton who cost me so much trouble. I thought you looked familiar when Marcus described you. So this is where you have been hiding." "Not hiding anymore." "No, I suppose not. Tell me, how is your sister Emily still in California?" Nathaniel's finger tightened on the trigger. "Do not. Do not what ask about family. I am simply being polite. Although I must admit I have often wondered what happened to her. Such a pretty girl. She must be, 20 now? 21, still young, still vulnerable. If you touch my sister—" "I have not touched anyone. Yet. but threats have a way of becoming necessary when people do not cooperate. Grace stepped forward, the Colt in her hand aimed at Clayton. "This ends now," she said. Clayton laughed. "Little girl, you are surrounded by 6 armed men. If you shoot me, they kill both of you. Then they ride to California. Is that what you want?" "Maybe," Grace said, and her hand was surprisingly steady. "Maybe that is a price I am willing to pay." Nathaniel saw it then, saw the change in Grace. She had walked into his cabin ready to sell herself for shelter. Now she stood in the snow, pointing a gun at the most powerful man in Silver Creek, willing to die to stop him. Whatever fear had controlled her was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Fury. Clayton saw it too, and for the first time he looked worried. "Let us all calm down," he said, his voice losing some of its confidence. "Nobody needs to die today." "You are wrong," Nathaniel said. "Someone does need to die today. The question is who?" He pulled something from his coat pocket, a red cylinder roughly 6 inches long. At this distance in the morning light, it could easily be mistaken for dynamite. 1 stick of dynamite, 50-foot blast radius. If I light this and throw it, everyone here dies, including me. My legacy will be the man who killed Clayton Graves. That is enough. It was a bluff. The object in his hand was not dynamite. It was a wooden cylinder he had carved and painted red the previous night. But in the tension of the moment, with guns pointed in every direction, it looked convincing. Marcus Webb swore. "Boss, if he has dynamite—" "He is bluffing," Clayton said, but he did not sound certain. "Are you willing to bet your life on that?" Nathaniel asked. "Because I am willing to bet mine." Young Billy, the farmer's son, was the first to break. His nerve, already fragile, snapped completely. "I did not sign up for this," he shouted and fired wildly in Nathaniel's direction. The bullet went wide, missing by 10 feet, but it shattered the standoff. Suddenly everyone was moving, shouting, firing. Nathaniel dove behind the water trough as bullets chewed into the barn wall behind where he had been standing. Grace ran for the cabin. Clayton scrambled backward toward his horse. Marcus and his men scattered, looking for cover that barely existed. The battle had begun. Grace reached the cabin and spun, firing the Colt. Her first shot missed completely. Her second hit one of Clayton's new men in the shoulder. He dropped screaming. Her third shot went high. Fourth missed. Fifth missed. Sixth and final round hit the same man again, this time in the chest. He stopped moving. She had killed a man. The reality of it hit her like a physical blow. But there was no time to process, no time to feel, only time to survive. She ducked inside the cabin, fumbling to reload with shaking hands. Nathaniel, behind the water trough, fired methodically. First shot hit one of the hired gunmen in the leg. The man fell. Second shot, aimed at Marcus Webb, missed as Marcus dove behind the wagon. Third shot splintered the wagon wheel. Fourth shot caught another gunman in the arm. The big man with the shotgun, the one Nathaniel had worried about, charged the cabin. Stupid, but brave. He got within 30 feet before Nathaniel's fifth shot caught him in the thigh. He stumbled, but kept coming, raising the shotgun. Grace appeared at the cabin window, fired her newly reloaded Colt. 2 shots. Both hit center mass. The big man collapsed 5 feet from the cabin door. Marcus Webb, professional that he was, had worked his way around to Nathaniel's flank. He was 60 yards away behind a small rise in the ground when he fired. The bullet grazed Nathaniel's left arm, cutting through coat and shirt and skin. Not deep, not disabling, but painful. Nathaniel turned, bringing the Winchester around, but Marcus had already ducked back. For 3 seconds, neither man could see the other. Then Marcus popped up, fired again. Nathaniel fired back. Both missed. The Winchester's magazine was nearly empty. Nathaniel had perhaps 3 rounds left. He needed to make them count. He waited, watching for Marcus to appear again. Patience. Discipline. The hunter's mindset. There. Marcus's head barely visible above the rise. Nathaniel fired, hit the ground inches from Marcus's face, spraying dirt. Marcus flinched back. Nathaniel ran, left the trough's protection, sprinted toward Marcus's position, closed the distance before Marcus could react. 20 yards. 10 yards. 5. They collided. Two men who had spent their lives fighting, now fighting each other. Marcus was older, but experienced. Nathaniel was younger, but had the momentum. They went down hard fists and elbows and knees, finding targets. Marcus threw a hook that caught Nathaniel's jaw. Stars exploded across his vision. He responded with an elbow strike to Marcus's nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood flowed. Marcus grabbed for a knife at his belt. Nathaniel caught his wrist. They rolled, grappling each, trying to gain advantage. The knife came free, slashed across Nathaniel's forearm, shallow but burning. Nathaniel headbutted Marcus, once, twice. Marcus's grip loosened. Nathaniel grabbed a rock smooth and heavy from the nearby creek bed, brought it down on Marcus's temple. The sound was sickening. Marcus went limp. Nathaniel stood breathing hard, bleeding from arm and face. He looked around. Young Billy and the remaining hired guns were gone, fled on their horses. The big man and another of Clayton's men lay dead. Marcus lay unconscious. Only Clayton remained. And Clayton was already on his horse, riding away as fast as the animal could run. Nathaniel retrieved his Winchester, checked the chamber. Empty. He drew the Colt. 6 rounds. Enough. "Let him go," Grace called from the cabin. "It is over." But Nathaniel knew better. It was not over. As long as Clayton Graves lived, it would never be over. He would send more men, would threaten Emily, would hunt them until one side or the other was dead. This had to end. Today. Now. He aimed the Colt at the retreating figure. 200 yards. An impossible shot with a pistol. He fired anyway. 5 shots. All missed. Clayton disappeared over the horizon. Grace walked to where Nathaniel stood. Blood dripped from his arm. His face was swelling where Marcus had hit him, but he was alive. "You let him get away," she said. "I could not hit him at that range." "What happens now?" Before Nathaniel could answer, they heard it. More horses, coming fast. From the west this time, not the south. Had Clayton circled around? Were there more men? Nathaniel reloaded the Colt with hands that suddenly felt heavy and slow. He was tired, so tired. How much more could they fight? But when the riders appeared, there were only 2, and one of them wore a badge. Deputy Marshal Hackett pulled up 30 yards away, taking in the scene. Dead men. Blood in the snow. Marcus unconscious and bound. Nathaniel and Grace standing together, both armed, both alive. The deputy dismounted, checked Marcus's pulse. "He'll live. I'm taking him into custody now. He won't be part of whatever happens next." "Jesus Christ," the deputy said. "What happened here?" "Self-defense," Nathaniel said simply. "They attacked. We defended." The deputy dismounted, walked through the scene, examining bodies, checking Marcus's bonds. He found young Billy hiding behind a snowdrift 200 yards away, brought him back at gunpoint. "Who started the shooting?" the deputy asked. Billy, terrified and wanting nothing more than to go home, told the truth. "I did. I fired first. I was scared. Clayton ordered us to take Grace back, kill Mr. Brooks if he resisted. It was all Clayton's orders." The deputy looked at Nathaniel and Grace. "There will be an inquest. Both of you need to testify. But based on what I see here and what this boy just said, I do not anticipate criminal charges. This looks like clear self-defense." "And Clayton?" Nathaniel asked. "He fled. That makes him look guilty. I will issue a warrant. But Wyoming territory is large. He could be anywhere." Nathaniel said nothing. But he knew. Clayton would not run far. Men like Clayton never did. They always believed they could win if they just had one more chance, one more scheme, one more attempt. This was not over. Not yet. But at least now they had the law on their side. And that was something. The old man's voice, speaking from 40 years in the future, concluded this section of the story. Thomas sat on the porch in Colorado notebook, forgotten, staring at his grandfather. "You fought 6 men. Grace and I together fought 6 men. She killed 1. I killed 1. We wounded several others. The rest ran. Marcus Webb survived but spent 2 years in territorial prison. Young Billy went home to his farm and never touched a gun again." "And Clayton?" The old man smiled. A cold smile. A smile that held the memory of what came next. Clayton did not run as far as the deputy thought. He made one final mistake, and that mistake would cost him everything. What mistake? He believed he could still win. He came back. One more time, and when he did, Grace was ready. Night was falling over the Colorado ranch. Lights appeared in the windows of the main house. Somewhere inside, Grace, now 66 years old, was preparing dinner. Thomas would eat with them, would hear the rest of the story, would learn what happened when pride met justice. But for now the old man paused. Let the weight of what he had already told settle into his grandson's mind. Let the young man understand what violence truly meant. Not glory, not honor, but blood and pain and the terrible choices that define a life. Tomorrow, Nathaniel said, I will tell you about the final confrontation, about the day Clayton Graves returned for one last attempt, about the moment Grace Hartley stopped being a victim and became something else entirely. But tonight we eat. We rest. Some stories cannot be rushed. Thomas nodded, understanding that his grandfather needed to stop, that reliving these memories even 40 years later carried a cost. They walked together into the house, leaving the empty porch behind. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky. The same stars that had looked down on a cabin in Wyoming 4 decades earlier. The same stars that would continue long after all the players in this story had turned to dust. But for now, for this moment, the story paused. The battle was over. But the war remained unfinished, and tomorrow Thomas would learn how it ended. 3 days passed. 3 days of tense waiting while wounds healed and strength returned. Nathaniel's arm, where the knife had cut, required stitches he performed himself using needle and thread meant for repairing saddles. The work was crude but effective. Grace cleaned and bandaged the wound daily, learning practical medicine from necessity. Deputy Marshal Hackett had taken Marcus Webb and young Billy into custody, along with detailed statements from both Nathaniel and Grace. He had arranged for the bodies to be transported to Silver Creek for proper burial. He had filed reports, done everything the law required. Then he had ridden away, leaving them alone again. But alone did not mean safe. On the evening of the 3rd day, as Nathaniel sat cleaning weapons by lamplight and Grace prepared a simple meal, they heard the sound, faint at first, distant, then growing closer, unmistakable. Horses. Nathaniel moved to the window, peered through the gap in the boards he had not yet removed, counted riders against the twilight sky. 5. His hand went to the Winchester, checked the magazine, fully loaded, 15 rounds. He had learned his lesson about preparedness. Grace, position. She moved without question to her spot near the stove, drew the Colt. Her hands no longer shook when she held it. 3 days of practice had built muscle memory and confidence. She would never be a marksman, but she could hit what she aimed at, most of the time. The riders stopped at the same distance Marcus Webb had chosen days earlier, 150 yards, far enough for safety, close enough to be seen. But this time the configuration was different. 4 riders hung back. 1 came forward alone. Clayton Graves. He rode with the same confidence he had displayed before, but something was different. His expensive suit was dusty. His horse, while still magnificent, showed signs of hard riding. His face, visible in the fading light, was drawn and tired. This was not a man who had fled to safety and comfort. This was a man who had been riding hard for 3 days, possibly without stopping. He came within 50 yards, dismounted, stood in the open arms spread wide to show he carried no weapons. "Mr. Brooks," he called, "I have come to talk." Nathaniel did not respond immediately. He studied Clayton's body language, the way he stood, the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong. Clayton Graves did not surrender, did not negotiate from weakness. Yet here he was, appearing vulnerable. It was a trap, had to be. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear," Nathaniel finally replied. "I have a proposition, a business arrangement that benefits everyone. I do not do business with men like you." "Men like me?" Clayton's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Mr. Brooks, you killed 2 of my employees, wounded 3 others. You cost me considerable money and reputation. Yet here I stand, offering peace. The least you can do is listen." Grace whispered from her position by the stove. "It is a trap." "I know," Nathaniel whispered back, "but I want to hear what he thinks he can offer." He raised his voice. "Say what you came to say, then leave." Clayton took a few steps closer. 40 yards now. His hands remained visible. "The law is looking for me. Deputy Hackett issued a warrant. Apparently young Billy told quite a story about my orders to kill you. The truth is less important than the narrative, and the narrative now paints me as the villain. You are the villain, perhaps. But villains have resources. Money. Connections. I can disappear into California or Mexico. Start over under a new name. I have done it before, but there is one problem." He paused for effect. "Anna Morrison." Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. How did Clayton know for certain that Anna was alive? Grace had bluffed about Anna, but she should not have known enough details to convince him completely. Clayton continued. "After our last meeting, I sent telegrams to contacts in San Francisco, asked them to look for a school teacher named Margaret Dawson. It took 2 days, but they found her. She is alive, teaching at a girls' school, living under the name you gave her 4 years ago." His voice hardened. "You made a fool of me, Mr. Brooks. You faked her death, cost me money, cost me face. Men in my business cannot afford to look foolish. So here is my proposition. Give me Grace Hartley. In return, I leave Anna Morrison alone. I disappear. You never see me again. Everyone wins." "Except Grace," Nathaniel said. "Miss Hartley is a prostitute with debts. Nobody will miss her. Anna Morrison is a respectable school teacher. Which life is worth more?" The calculation was cold and brutal. Clayton was asking Nathaniel to weigh 2 lives, to choose which woman deserved protection. It was the kind of moral equation powerful men use to maintain control, make the choices impossible, make good people compromise, make everyone complicit. Nathaniel's answer was immediate. "Both lives have equal worth. I will not trade one for the other." "Then you doom them both. I have men in San Francisco. 1 telegram and Anna disappears. You will have saved no one." Grace stepped into the doorway. The movement was sudden enough that Clayton's hand twitched toward where a weapon would normally be holstered. But his holster was empty. He had come unarmed as promised, or apparently unarmed. "Mr. Graves," Grace said, her voice steady and clear, "you cannot have me. You cannot have Anna. You cannot have anyone anymore. Your time is over." Clayton's face twisted into something ugly. "Little girl, you understand nothing about power. I have money. I have men. I have connections that stretch from here to Washington. You have a cabin and a borrowed gun and a broken-down detective protecting you. You think you have won. You have won nothing." "I have won my freedom. That is everything." Clayton laughed, and it was a sound without joy. "Freedom, is that what you call this, hiding in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, looking over your shoulder every day for the rest of your life? That is not freedom. That is a different kind of prison." He took another step forward. 35 yards. "But it does not have to be this way. Come with me. Voluntarily. Work off your debt in 6 months. Then I give you papers saying you owe nothing. You can go wherever you want. Start fresh. Real freedom." "Your word means nothing," Grace said. "Then what would convince you? A written contract witnessed by a lawyer? I can arrange that." Nathaniel understood then what Clayton was doing. He was stalling, talking, moving incrementally closer. His 4 men in the distance had dismounted, were moving into position, flanking. This conversation was cover for an attack. "Grace, inside, now." She heard the urgency in his voice, retreated into the cabin. Nathaniel raised the Winchester. "That is close enough, Clayton. I am unarmed." "No, you are not. You have a Derringer in your coat pocket. Small caliber. 2 shots. Effective range maybe 20 feet. You were hoping to get close enough to use it." Clayton's hand froze halfway to his pocket. His face registered genuine surprise. "How did you know?" "Because I was a Pinkerton detective for 5 years. I know every trick, every hidden weapon, every con. You taught me well, even if you did not mean to." For the first time, real anger crossed Clayton's features. The mask of civility dropped completely. "Fine. No more games, no more talking. My men will burn you out. You have maybe 30 rounds of ammunition. I have 4 men with rifles and all the time in the world. By morning you will be dead, both of you." "Maybe," Nathaniel agreed. "But you will die first. I can put a bullet through your skull right now. 40 yards. I will not miss." "Then you murder an unarmed man. Deputy Hackett will hunt you. You will hang." "Perhaps. But you will still be dead, and that is worth hanging for." The standoff stretched. Seconds became minutes. Neither man moved. Neither man blinked. In the distance, Clayton's men had stopped advancing, waiting for orders. Then Grace's voice came from inside the cabin, not afraid, not desperate, almost curious. "Mr. Brooks, I have a question." "What?" Nathaniel asked, not taking his eyes off Clayton. "When you saved Anna Morrison, did you kill anyone?" "No." "When you protected me these past days, you tried not to kill unless you had to." "Yes." "So you are not a murderer, you are a protector." "I try to be." "Then protect Anna, and protect me, the only way you can." Nathaniel understood immediately what she was saying. Clayton Graves would never stop, would never give up. As long as he lived, Anna was in danger, Grace was in danger, Emily was in danger. Every woman who had ever crossed his path remained a target. There was only one solution, the solution Nathaniel had been avoiding for 4 years, the solution that would make him the thing he had always feared becoming, a killer, not in self-defense, not in the heat of battle, but in cold calculation. Murder. The old man's voice, speaking from the future porch in Colorado, added context. "I had a choice in that moment, Thomas. I could let Clayton walk away, could hope the law caught him eventually, could pray he would disappear into Mexico and never return. That would have been the moral choice, the righteous choice, the choice a good man would make. Or I could do what needed to be done, eliminate a threat permanently, guarantee safety for women who could not protect themselves. That was the practical choice, the brutal choice, the choice that would stain my soul but save lives. I had perhaps 3 seconds to decide." Clayton, sensing hesitation, turned to walk back to his horse. "I see you are not the man I thought you were, Brooks. All talk, no action. I will send my men tonight. Sleep well." Nathaniel's finger moved to the trigger, aimed at the space between Clayton's shoulder blades. An easy shot, a killing shot. One squeeze, and it would be over. He began to apply pressure. "Stop." Grace's voice, firm, commanding. Nathaniel's finger froze. She stepped out of the cabin, the Colt in her hand, walking forward with steady purpose. "What are you doing?" Nathaniel asked. "Protecting you." She walked past him, walked toward Clayton, 20 feet, 15, 10. Clayton turned, surprised. His hand went to his pocket for the Derringer. But Grace was faster. She raised the Colt with both hands, aimed exactly as Nathaniel had taught her. Center mass, 2 rounds. "This is for Lily May, for Anna Morrison, for Sarah Winters, for every woman you broke." Clayton's hand cleared his pocket. The Derringer appeared. Grace fired. Once. Twice. Both shots hit. The range was point blank. Impossible to miss. Clayton staggered backward. The Derringer fell from his fingers. He looked down at his chest, at the blood spreading across his expensive suit, and his face registered something between surprise and resignation. He fell to his knees, looked up at Grace. "You," he gasped. "You are nothing." "No," Grace said quietly. "I am free." Clayton Graves collapsed face first into the snow, moved once, twice, then stopped moving entirely. The 4 men in the distance saw their employer fall, saw Grace standing over the body with a smoking gun. They mounted their horses and rode away. Without Clayton to pay them, without Clayton to give orders, they had no reason to fight. They disappeared into the twilight. Grace stood over Clayton's body for a long moment. The gun hung loose in her hand. Her breathing came fast and shallow. Nathaniel walked to her side. "Grace?" She did not respond, did not move. Shock was setting in, the reality of what she had done hitting her like a physical force. "Grace, look at me." She turned. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. "I killed him. I killed a man." "Yes." "I am a murderer." "No. You are a survivor." "Is there a difference?" Nathaniel took the gun from her hand gently. His voice was soft but firm. "Clayton Graves was drawing a weapon. He intended to kill you. You defended yourself. That is not murder. That is justice. The law will not see it that way. Maybe, maybe not. But we will face that when it comes. Right now, you need to breathe. You need to stay calm. Can you do that?" Grace nodded, took a deep breath, then another. Color began to return to her face. The shock was fading, replaced by something harder, understanding, acceptance. "He would have killed us." "Yes." "He would have killed Anna." "Yes." "I had no choice." "You had a choice. You chose to protect people who could not protect themselves. That is not a sin, Grace. That is courage." They stood in the snow as darkness fell completely. Clayton Graves lay dead between them and the cabin. In the distance, the sound of retreating horses faded to nothing. The world became silent except for the wind. After a time, Grace spoke again. "What do we do now?" "Now we bury him. Then we wait for the deputy. Then we tell the truth, all of it, and we hope 12 men on a jury believe us." The next morning they buried Clayton Graves in a shallow grave 50 yards from the cabin. The ground was frozen. Digging was brutal work. Nathaniel's wounded arm protested every shovelful, but the work needed doing. Bodies left in the open attracted predators, both the animal kind and the human kind. They marked the grave with a simple wooden cross. No name, no dates, just a cross. Nathaniel spoke no words over the grave. Grace stood silent. Some deaths did not deserve ceremony. Marcus Webb and the others who had died in the first battle had already been taken to Silver Creek by the deputy. But Clayton's body would stay here, evidence of what had happened, proof for the inquest that would inevitably follow. Deputy Marshal Thomas Hackett arrived the next morning exactly 72 hours after his first visit as promised. He looked at the grave, looked at Nathaniel and Grace, listened to their statement, examined the Derringer they had recovered from Clayton's pocket, a Remington Model 95 .41 caliber 2 shots, small but deadly at close range. "He drew first?" the deputy asked. "Yes," Grace said. "I told him to stop. He reached for his pocket. I saw the gun. I fired." "How many shots?" "2. "Both hit?" "Yes." The deputy walked around the grave, thinking, calculating. Finally, he looked up. "This is the 3rd time in a week that bodies have appeared in my jurisdiction. First the battle with Marcus Webb. Now this. I am starting to think you two attract trouble." "We do not want trouble," Nathaniel said. "We just want to be left alone." Unfortunately, killing Clayton Graves is not the kind of thing that lets you be left alone. He had business partners, investors, people who might want revenge. But more importantly, he had a reputation, and reputations matter even after death. "What are you saying?" "I am saying there will be an inquest, a full investigation. The territorial governor has already been notified because Clayton Graves was wealthy and connected. You will both need to testify, and I cannot guarantee the outcome will be in your favor." Grace felt her chest tighten. After everything, after finally being free, would the law punish her for defending herself? The deputy must have seen the fear on her face. "But," he continued, "I can tell you this. When word gets out about what happened, about why it happened, you will have more support than you think. Clayton Graves was feared, not loved, and fear does not breed loyalty." He proved correct. When news of Clayton's death reached Silver Creek, the reaction was not grief but relief. Women began coming forward, first 1, then 5, then 20, each with stories of abuse, of fraudulent debts, of threats, of violence. Sarah Winters, the boarding house owner who had warned Grace to run, testified that Clayton had forced her into complicity through blackmail. He had evidence of her own past crimes, things she had done to survive years earlier. He had used that evidence to control her. She had wanted to help the women working for her, but Clayton's grip was too tight. Now that he was dead, Sarah had nothing to fear. She opened the real ledger, the one Clayton had kept hidden. It showed systematic fraud. Dozens of women cheated, hundreds of dollars stolen, years of lives destroyed. The inquest was held in Silver Creek's courthouse 2 weeks after Clayton's death, Judge Harold Morrison presiding. No relation to Anna Morrison, though the similarity of names was noted. 12 men sat as jury, all from Silver Creek or nearby towns, all familiar with Clayton's reputation. Grace testified first. She spoke clearly without emotion, recounting every detail. Her father's death, her mother's illness, the debt that had driven her to Silver Creek, the 3 years of servitude, Lily May's death, her escape, the blizzard, finding Nathaniel's cabin, Clayton's pursuit. She described the final confrontation, Clayton's threats, the Derringer, her decision to fire. "Did you want to kill him?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I wanted him to leave us alone. But he would not. He could not. Men like Clayton Graves cannot let anyone defy them. So yes, I killed him. And I would do it again, because he was going to kill us, and he would have kept killing until someone stopped him." Nathaniel testified next. He explained his history with Clayton, the Anna Morrison situation, his resignation from the Pinkertons, his 4 years in hiding. He spoke about the night Grace arrived, the preparations they had made, the battles they had fought. "Why did you help her?" the prosecutor asked. "Because it was right. Because no one else would. Because 4 years ago I helped another woman escape Clayton Graves, and I swore if I ever had another chance to stop him, I would. Even if it meant killing. I did not want to kill. I wanted to defend. But yes, if defense required killing, then yes. Some men are too dangerous to leave alive. Clayton Graves was one of them." Sarah Winters testified, showed the real ledger, explained Clayton's operation, named other victims. The weight of evidence became overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. "In the matter of the death of Clayton Graves, we find that Grace Hartley acted in lawful self-defense. No charges." Relief flooded through Grace. Nathaniel squeezed her hand. It was over, truly over. After 3 weeks of fear and uncertainty, the law had finally worked in their favor. But victory was not celebration. It was simply survival confirmed. Spring came to Wyoming Territory in 1884. Snow melted, grass grew. The land which had seemed so hostile in December revealed itself as beautiful and alive. Grace remained at Nathaniel's cabin through the winter, sleeping in the bed while he slept in the chair. Separate, respectful, 2 people learning to coexist without obligation or expectation. In March, Sarah Winters made an offer. "The boarding house is mine now, legally." Clayton's assets were seized and auctioned. "I bought the building with money I had hidden for years. I am converting it. Real boarding house, honest lodging, and I want to do more. Teach women skills so they do not end up like we did. Reading, writing, mathematics, things that give choices." She looked at Grace. "I need help. Someone who understands what these women have survived. Someone they will trust. Will you come back to Silver Creek, not as a worker, as a teacher?" Grace considered. Silver Creek held terrible memories, but it also held women who needed help. Women still trapped in lives they had not chosen. "I need to think about it." "Take your time. The offer stands." Grace discussed it with Nathaniel that evening. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to help, but I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of going back. Afraid of those memories. Afraid that I will never be more than what Clayton made me." Nathaniel set down the book he had been reading, looked at her with complete attention. "Grace Hartley, you walked 4 days through a blizzard to save yourself. You learned to shoot in one morning. You fought beside me against 6 armed men. You killed Clayton Graves when he threatened people you cared about. You are not what he made you. You are what you chose to become, and you chose to be brave." His words settled into her like seeds into fertile ground. "Will you come with me to Silver Creek?" "No, that is your path. You need to walk it yourself, but I will be here. If you need help, if you need refuge, this cabin is always open to you." "What will you do?" "I am thinking of claiming land. The Homestead Act allows any citizen to claim 160 acres, work it for 5 years, then it is yours. I could build something real, not hiding, living." "Where?" "There is land near Riverton, good water, timber for building. I went there last week while you were in town. I could build a house, a proper house, not a cabin. Plant crops, raise cattle maybe, make something that lasts." Grace smiled. "That sounds good." In April she returned to Silver Creek, moved into a room at Sarah's boarding house, not upstairs where the working rooms had been. Sarah had torn out those walls, converted the space into a schoolroom. Tables, chairs, books purchased with money from Clayton's seized assets. Revenge served cold and practical. Grace taught reading 3 days a week, simple lessons at first. The alphabet, basic words. But the women learned quickly, hungry for knowledge that meant freedom. Knowledge meant choices. Choices meant life. Nathaniel filed his homestead claim, began building. For the first time in 5 years, he was not hiding. He used his real name, told people his history if they asked. Some judged, some respected. Most just accepted that everyone had a past, and what mattered was who you were now. He wrote to his sister Emily in California. The letter was simple. "I am safe. I am building a life. If you want to come back, you are welcome, but stay there if you are happy. Just know you have family here when you need it." Emily wrote back 3 months later. She would stay in California for now, but maybe someday. "Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for surviving." In June, Sarah Winters received a letter from San Francisco, from a school teacher named Margaret Dawson. Anna Morrison, now living openly under a new identity, had heard about Clayton's death, heard about Grace's testimony. She wanted to thank both Grace and Nathaniel. The letter said she had testified finally to California authorities about Clayton's operation. Her testimony led to arrests of 2 of Clayton's business partners who had operations in San Francisco. More women freed, more justice served. Some seeds grow slowly, but they grow. In October of 1885, Nathaniel completed his house. 2 stories, 4 rooms, solid construction, room for a family someday, though he had no immediate plans. He built a barn, acquired 2 horses, planted winter wheat, started a herd of cattle, just 10 head to begin. Grace visited on Sundays. They ate meals together, discussed the week. She told him about her students. He told her about his land. Friendship deepened. Respect grew. Something else began to form. Neither could quite name it yet, but it was there. Possibility. In spring of 1886, Nathaniel asked a question. "Would you consider marriage?" Grace looked at him surprised. "Are you proposing?" "I am proposing a partnership, not romance unless that develops naturally, but a practical arrangement. You need stability. I need help running this land. Together we could build something neither of us could build alone." That is the least romantic proposal I have ever heard. Probably, but it is honest. Grace smiled. "Yes, I will marry you, on one condition." "What?" "That we never lie to each other, about anything, ever." "Agreed." They married in May. Small ceremony. Sarah Winters and 10 of Grace's students attended. Judge Morrison officiated. No flowers, no fancy dress, just 2 people choosing to face the future together. That night in the house Nathaniel had built, they sat by the fire. "Are you happy?" Nathaniel asked. "I do not know yet, but I am not afraid. That is something." It is everything. Their marriage was not passion. It was partnership. They worked side by side, built the ranch together. In 1887 their first child was born, Samuel, strong and healthy. In 1889 Ruth. In 1891 Michael. 3 children who grew up learning to work the land, learning to read from their mother, learning to shoot from their father, learning that strength came not from violence, but from knowing when violence was necessary and when it was not. Emily came to visit in 1890. She was 27 now, married to a doctor in Sacramento, 4 children of her own. She met Grace, met the children, saw what Nathaniel had built. "You did it," she said. "You made a life." "We made a life, Grace and I together. Neither of us could have done it alone." Emily stayed 2 weeks, then returned to California, but she came back every summer after that. Connections renewed, family restored. The years passed. 1890 became 1900. The new century arrived with hope and progress, electricity, automobiles, airplanes. The world changed rapidly. But on the Brooks Ranch near Riverton, Wyoming, life remained steady. Seasons turned, crops grew, cattle bred, children became adults. Samuel Brooks, the eldest, became a rancher himself, bought land adjacent to his father's in 1905, married in 1907, had 4 children. Ruth married a teacher, moved to Cheyenne, raised 4 children who all went to college. Michael became a mining engineer, went to the Colorado School of Mines, married, had 2 children. The years continued to pass with steady rhythm. Nathaniel and Grace grew old together, their partnership deepening with each season. By 1920, Nathaniel was 69, Grace was 63. Their hair had turned silver, their hands gnarled by decades of work, but their minds remained sharp and their spirits strong. They spent their days reading, working the land as much as their aging bodies allowed, and welcoming the constant stream of children and grandchildren who filled their home with life and noise. 3 more years would pass before Thomas came to the ranch to hear his grandfather's story. The sun had fully set over the Colorado ranch. Inside the house, Grace's lamp cast warm light through the windows. Thomas sat with his grandfather on the porch notebook full of scribbled notes, mind full of questions. "You loved her," Thomas said. It was not a question. Eventually, it was not love at first. It was respect, partnership, trust. Love came later, but when it came, it was deep, real, built on years of working together, surviving together. That kind of love lasts longer than passion. "Do you regret killing those men, Marcus Webb's companions, the ones in the battle?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. "Every day, Thomas, every single day. But I do not regret the choice. I regret that the choice was necessary. There is a difference. I do not understand. A man who kills without regret is a monster. A man who kills and feels nothing has lost his humanity. But a man who kills when necessary, who carries that weight, who understands the cost that man is still human, still moral. The guilt proves you still have a conscience." Thomas absorbed this, tried to imagine himself in his grandfather's position, could not quite manage it. "What was the most important thing you learned?" Nathaniel smiled, a soft, sad smile. "That worth is not given. It is claimed." Grace thought she was worthless because that is what men like Clayton taught her. But worth does not come from what others think. It comes from your own actions, your own choices, your own refusal to surrender. I also learned that strength has many forms. Physical strength matters, but moral strength matters more. The strength to do what is right when doing right is hard. The strength to protect when protection requires sacrifice. The strength to build when destruction would be easier. He paused, looked at his grandson. "Clayton Graves was physically weaker than me, but he had power, money, connections, and he used that power to hurt people. I had strength, training, weapons, and I used that strength to stop him. The question every man must answer is this: what will you do with whatever power you have? Will you use it to control others or to protect them? Your generation will face this question differently than mine did. You will not likely face men with guns on the Wyoming plains, but you will face men with other weapons, economic weapons, legal weapons, social weapons, and you will have to decide whether to use your education, your privilege, your strength to serve yourself or to serve others." Thomas wrote furiously, trying to capture every word. "Grandfather, do you think you did the right thing overall?" "I think I did the best I could with the information I had. I made mistakes. I ran when I should have fought. I fought when I maybe could have found another way. But I tried. I tried to be better than my worst impulses. I tried to protect people who needed protection. I tried to build something that would outlast me." He gestured toward the ranch, the land stretching into darkness. "This is my legacy. Not the land, not the buildings, the values, the idea that every person has worth. That power carries responsibility. That strength exists to defend the weak, not exploit them. If my children carry these values, if my grandchildren carry them, then maybe all of it, all the violence and pain and fear, maybe it meant something." The door opened. Grace, 66 years old but still moving with energy, stepped onto the porch. "Dinner is ready. Thomas, you are staying." "Yes, Grandma." "Good. I made your favorite, beef stew." The three of them went inside. The porch stood empty. Above, stars emerged in the clear Colorado sky. The same stars that had watched over a cabin in Wyoming 40 years earlier. The same stars that would shine long after all of them had gone. But for tonight, in this moment, 3 generations sat around a table. Ate together. Talked together. Connected by blood and story, and the values passed from old to young. Thomas looked at his grandmother. Really looked. Saw past the gray hair and aged face to the woman who had walked 4 days through a blizzard, who had learned to shoot in a single morning, who had killed the man who tried to own her. "Grandma," he said, "were you scared when you shot Clayton Graves?" Grace paused, fork halfway to her mouth, set it down, looked at her grandson with eyes that had seen too much but refused to look away. Terrified. But fear is not the opposite of courage, Thomas. Fear is the prerequisite for courage. You cannot be brave if you are not first afraid. The question is whether you let fear control you or whether you act despite the fear. Did you ever regret it? No, never, not for 1 second. Clayton Graves destroyed lives. If I had not stopped him, he would have destroyed more. Sometimes the world requires people to do hard things, not because they want to, but because no one else will. Your grandfather taught me that, not with words, with actions. He could have turned me away that night, could have sent me back into the storm, could have handed me over to Clayton. Any of those choices would have been easier. But he chose the hard path, the path that required sacrifice and risk, and that choice changed everything. Nathaniel reached over and squeezed his wife's hand. Even after 37 years of marriage, even after everything they had survived together, the simple gesture carried meaning. After dinner, Thomas prepared to ride back to town. Nathaniel walked him to his horse. "Thank you for telling me the story, Grandfather. Thank you for listening. Stories only matter if someone hears them, someone remembers, someone carries them forward. I will write this down, preserve it, maybe publish it someday. If you do change the names, protect the people who are still alive. Anna Morrison especially. She deserves her privacy." "I will." Thomas mounted his horse, started to ride away, then stopped, turned back. "Grandfather, one more question." "Yes." "If you had to do it all over again, knowing everything you know now, would you still open that door when Grace knocked?" Nathaniel did not hesitate. "Every time, without question. Because some choices define who you are, and I would rather be the man who opened the door than the man who turned her away." Thomas nodded, understanding settling into him like stones into a foundation. He rode away into the night. Nathaniel stood on the porch, alone for a moment, remembering. A cabin in Wyoming, a blizzard, a knock on the door, a woman with nothing except the courage to keep walking. A decision that had seemed small at the time but had rippled forward through decades. Grace joined him, slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "About how one night can change everything. about how the smallest acts of kindness can grow into entire lives. Do you think Thomas understood? I think he heard. Understanding comes later. Maybe when he faces his own moment, his own choice between easy and right. They stood together in the darkness. Two people who had survived the worst the world could offer and had built something beautiful from the wreckage. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, honest, theirs. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm. Outside, the night was cold but clear. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Below, the earth turned, and somewhere everywhere people faced their own moments, their own choices, their own chances to be better than their fear. Nathaniel Brooks and Grace Hartley had made their choice 40 years ago in a blizzard. They had chosen courage over comfort, justice over law, each other over isolation, and that choice had built a legacy that would outlast them both. Not a legacy of violence, though violence had been necessary. Not a legacy of wealth, though they had prospered. A legacy of values, of dignity, of the radical idea that every person, regardless of their past, regardless of what society said they were worth, had inherent value that could not be bought or sold or taken. That was the lesson, the one Nathaniel had tried to teach Thomas, the one Grace had lived every day since leaving Silver Creek, the one their children and grandchildren would carry forward into whatever future awaited. The world would change, technology would advance, society would evolve, but the fundamental question would remain the same. When someone needs help, do you turn away or do you open the door? When evil threatens the innocent, do you remain silent or do you speak? When the cost of doing right is high, do you choose the easy wrong or the hard right? These were not questions with simple answers, but they were questions worth asking, worth struggling with, worth sacrificing for. Nathaniel and Grace had asked these questions in 1883, had answered them with blood and fear and stubborn refusal to surrender, and in answering them had built a life worth living. That was legacy enough. They turned and walked into the house together. The door closed behind them. The porch stood empty under the stars. But inside, there was warmth. There was family. There was the quiet satisfaction of a story told and a lesson passed on. Some stories end with death, others with birth. This story ended with both. The death of who they had been, the birth of who they chose to become. And that perhaps was the most important lesson of all. Who you are is not determined by what happens to you. It is determined by what you choose to do about it. Grace Hartley chose to walk through a blizzard. Nathaniel Brooks chose to open his door. Together they chose to fight. And in fighting, they chose to live. Not just survive, but truly, fully, freely live. And that made all the difference.